I buried my dear brother 41 years ago. But last Wednesday, something unbelievable happened. Someone called me in the middle of the night, and when I answered, it was him. His voice on the other end of the line, scratchy and unsure, asked me, "Angela?" I was sound asleep, you know. That deep sleep you fall into after midnight. The phone on my nightstand started buzzing and ringing, tearing through the silence of the bedroom. It was 3 a.m. My husband, Robert, didn't even stir next to me. I looked at the screen and saw an unknown number, a Seattle area code. My first thought was just to ignore it. I mean, who calls at this hour from a number they don't know? But some gut feeling I didn't even know I had, made me swipe my finger and answer. I put the phone to my ear, still lying down, and said quietly, "Hello?" On the other end, there was silence. Just the sound of someone breathing and some background noise, like the echo in a big empty room. I was just about to hang up when a man's voice, rough as sandpaper, asked, "Is this Angela?" My whole body went cold. The voice belonged to a stranger, but there was a tone, a rhythm, something that made me sit bolt upright in bed. My heart started pounding in my chest, a runaway drum. "Yes, this is her," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who's calling?" The pause on the other end felt like it lasted forever. And then he said the three words that shattered my world into a million pieces. "It's me. It's Jimmy." The phone slipped from my hand and hit the rug with a dull thud. I just sat there in the dark, staring at nothing, trying to make sense of it. Jimmy. No, it couldn't be. Let me back up a little so you can understand just how insane that phone call was. My name is Angela Carr. I'm 62 years old, and I live here in Spokane, Washington. And 41 years ago, in February of 1984, I buried my younger brother, James Carr. We all called him Jimmy. He was only 19, just a kid full of dreams, with this smile that could light up a room. He died in a Greyhound bus crash on I-90 near Snoqualmie Pass during a terrible snowstorm. 16 passengers died that day. I was 21, and I was the one who had to go to the makeshift morgue to identify his body. I was the one who had to go home and tell our mom that her favorite child, her baby boy, was gone. I saw his body. I signed the papers. I picked out the casket. I threw the first handful of dirt on his grave. So when I picked the phone up off the floor, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold it, I was just filled with rage. This was a prank. A sick, cruel prank. "Listen here, you son of a bitch," I said, my voice thick with tears and fury. "I don't know who you are, but this is the sickest thing anyone has ever done. My brother is dead. I buried my brother 41 years ago." The voice on the other end didn't change. It was still calm, tired. "I know," he said. "I know it's been 41 years. I just found out. I didn't know my name. I didn't know anything. But I found a newspaper clipping. About the bus crash. It had my picture in it. A high school graduation picture. And the name, James Carr. That just disarmed me. The anger started to give way to this dizzying confusion. My brain couldn't keep up. What? What are you talking about?" I stammered. "Where are you?" "I'm not exactly sure," he answered. "It's a place called Pioneer Square. I think I live in a shelter here on Pike Street. I have amnesia. I don't remember anything before about 14 years ago. I woke up in a hospital, no ID, didn't know my own name. They call me Jimmy here, 'cause I used to mutter it. I never knew why, until now." I felt like I was going to faint. I held my head with my free hand. Skeptical, but with this terrifying spark of hope igniting in my chest, I decided to test him. "What do you remember?" I asked. "If you're really Jimmy, what do you remember from when we were kids?" He was quiet for a moment. I could hear him breathing, a heavy, labored sound. "I don't remember facts," he said, his voice shaky. "It's more feelings, dreams. I dream about snow, about being so cold and screaming. But there's something else. A house with a blue door and someone, a woman, making blueberry pancakes. Every Sunday, a sweet smell. The air left my lungs. That was our mom. Every single Sunday, rain or shine, she made us blueberry pancakes. The front door of our childhood home was royal blue. Jimmy always ate more than anyone, stacking 5, 6 of them on his plate. No one else would know that. It was ours. It was such a small, private detail. The tears started streaming down my face, silent and hot. What do you look like?" I asked, my voice a whisper. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Old. Worn out. The picture in the paper is 41 years old, but..." I recognized myself. In the eyes, mostly. They haven't changed. I needed more. I needed one final piece of proof, something that couldn't be a dream, a crazy coincidence. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and pictured my little brother running through the yard. "Jimmy," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Jimmy had a scar on his left forearm from when he fell off his bike when he was 6, 11 stitches. On the other end of the line, the silence was so heavy I could feel the weight of it on my shoulders. I held my breath, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. Every passing second was torture. Was this a trick? Did he guess? Maybe he'd done some research. But how? The internet didn't exist like that back in 1984. Finally, his voice came back, fainter, like he was searching for something in the dark. "A scar," he repeated, almost to himself. I have a scar. Right here." I heard a rustling sound, like fabric moving, as if he was pulling up his sleeve. "On my left forearm. It's a bad one. Kinda long. Never knew where it came from." That was it. That was the final piece of the impossible puzzle clicking into place. A sob escaped my throat, a sound I hadn't made in decades. It wasn't a cry of grief. It was a cry of shock, of relief, of 41 years of mourning shattering all at once. The phone nearly fell out of my hand again. I bent over, putting my forehead on my knees, and just let myself cry. An ugly, loud cry that shook my whole body. "Angela? You there?" his voice asked, full of concern. "Yeah," I managed to get out between sobs. "Yeah, I'm here. Jimmy. Oh my God, it's you. It's really you." I pulled myself together, wiping my face on the back of my hand. The disbelief gave way to an urgency that took over every cell in my body. I had to see him. I had to touch him. I had to make sure he wasn't just a ghost on a telephone line. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice now firm, filled with a determination I hadn't felt in a long time. "Tell me the exact address. I'm coming to get you." He hesitated. "Angela, no, that's not a good idea. You don't understand. I'm not the person you remember. I'm a homeless man. I must look scary. I don't want you to see me like this." His words hit me, but not in the way he intended. The thought of him, alone and ashamed, only strengthened my resolve. "I don't care," I said, my voice rising. "I don't care if you have a beard down to your knees or if you haven't showered in a month. You're my brother, my little brother, and you're alive. That's all that matters. Give me the address. Now." There was another pause, and this time I heard a choked sound. He was crying, too. "It's a shelter," he said, his voice breaking. "The Pike Street shelter, in Pioneer Square. Everyone here knows me. Just ask for Jimmy. Pike Street. Seattle," I repeated, committing the words to memory. Okay, I'm in Spokane. It's about a 6-hour drive, maybe a little less this time of night." My brain was going a mile a minute, calculating, planning. "I'm leaving right now. I'll be there around noon, maybe earlier. Wait for me. Please, Jimmy, wait for me at the door." "I'll wait," he whispered. "I'll wait. I'll see you soon," I said, and hung up before I could fall apart again. The silence in the room returned, but now it was different. It was an electric silence, filled with impossible possibilities. I shot out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold floor, and started moving like a whirlwind. I threw open the closet, grabbing the first pair of jeans and the first sweater I saw. I was shaking, but not from the cold. It was pure adrenaline. All the noise woke up Robert. He sat up in bed, blinking, his hair all messed up. "Angie? What happened? It's a little after 3. He'd been married to me for 37 years. He knew the sound of my every breath, the tone of my every word. He knew something was very, very wrong, or very, very right. I stopped, one boot in my hand, and looked at him. How could I possibly explain? How do you put into words that the brother he only knew from photos and sad stories, the ghost that lived in our house, was alive and waiting for me at a homeless shelter in Seattle? The words wouldn't come. I have to go to Seattle, was all I could manage. Right now. He frowned, concern taking over his sleepy face. Seattle? Now? Why? Did something happen to your niece? I shook my head. No, they're fine. It's something else, a family emergency. I'll explain later, I promise. When I know more, I have to go. Please, don't ask any questions right now. He looked at me for a long moment. He could see the desperation in my eyes. He could see that I wasn't thinking straight, that I was running on pure instinct. And, like the wonderful man he is, he trusted me. Okay, he said simply. Okay, Angie, take my credit card. Fill up the tank. Drive safe, please. And call me the second you get there. I don't care what time it is. I rushed over to him, gave him a quick kiss on the cheek, and whispered, "Thank you." I grabbed my purse, my car keys, and left the room without looking back. In less than 5 minutes, I was in my car, the engine rumbling in the dark, silent street. The dashboard lights lit up my tear-streaked face. I put the car in drive, pulling away from our quiet street and headed for the highway. Headed for Seattle. Headed for a ghost. I-90, at that time of morning, was a dark, empty river. Just my car's headlights cutting through the blackness and the steady hum of the tires on the asphalt. I drove for 1 hour, 2, 3, fueled by bad gas station coffee and a frantic energy that kept the exhaustion at bay. The adrenaline from the phone call was still pumping through my veins, pushing me forward, toward Seattle, toward him. My brother. My brother was alive. I repeated it to myself like a mantra, a prayer. Jimmy is alive. But as the miles ticked by and the sky in the east began to lighten, turning from black to a deep navy blue, the doubt started to creep in. You know that annoying little voice in the back of your mind? The one that pours cold water on your dreams? It started whispering, "This is crazy, Angela. It's a hoax. Someone found out about your brother and is playing the cruelest trick in the world on you." I tried to ignore it, but the voice insisted. How did he know about the scar? How did he know about the pancakes? Was it possible that someone from our hometown, someone who knew us well, had cooked up this evil plan? But why? For what? It made no sense. And his voice, as rough and old as it sounded, there was something there, an echo of the boy who lived in my memories. Then I saw the sign, a big green sign reflecting in my headlights. Snoqualmie Pass, next exit. My stomach lurched. My foot wavered on the gas pedal. This was it. This was where it all happened. And suddenly, I wasn't in my car in 2025 anymore. I was back in February 1984. I was 21, wearing a jean jacket that wasn't nearly warm enough for the snow falling outside. I was sitting in an uncomfortable plastic chair in a high school gym that had been turned into a command center and temporary morgue. The place smelled like burnt coffee, wet wool, and disinfectant. And underneath it all, a sweet, metallic smell that my 21-year-old brain couldn't or wouldn't place. A state trooper, a tall man with a kind, tired face, knelt in front of me. "Miss Carr," he said, his voice low, "we have one of the passengers. The description matches your brother's, but the crash was severe. I need to prepare you." His face, I just nodded. I was numb. I had driven up with my mom, but she was in a state of shock, sedated at a nearby motel. I was the only one who could do this. I was the big sister. It was my job. The trooper led me to an area sectioned off by privacy screens. There were several gurneys covered with white sheets. He stopped in front of one of them. My heart felt like it had stopped beating. The air grew thin. "Are you ready?" he asked. I wasn't, but I nodded again. He pulled back the sheet, and the doubt that was haunting me now on this dark highway was born in that exact moment. The face, you have no idea. It wasn't my brother's face. It was barely a human face. It was swollen, purple, disfigured by the impact and then by the freezing cold of the snow. One side was crushed. There were cuts. I felt vomit rise in my throat and I swallowed it back down, the bitter taste burning. The trooper held my arm, steadying me. "Is it him?" he asked gently. I looked at the dark hair, matted to the forehead with dried blood. The height seemed right. The build? Maybe. I was panicking, my brain screaming, "No, that's not him! Get him out of here!" But then I saw his hand, and on his ring finger was the cheap silver ring he'd bought at a fair and never took off. He said it was for good luck. It was the ring. It was the only familiar thing on that broken, alien body. And in my grief, my shock, my 21-year-old desperation, that was enough. The tears finally came. "It's him," I whispered. "It's Jimmy." The blare of a truck horn snapped me back to the present. I had drifted onto the shoulder. My face was covered in tears. I rested my head on the steering wheel, my whole body shaking. What if it wasn't him? What if, in my shock and grief, I had identified the body of some other boy who maybe also had a cheap silver ring? What if my Jimmy had survived, thrown clear of the bus, injured and memory wiped, and no one ever found him? The guilt hit me like a tidal wave, guilt so heavy, so suffocating I could barely breathe. If he's been alive all this time, what kind of life has he had? Alone, lost, nameless. While I moved on. I married Robert, had my kids, my grandkids. I built a life on top of his grave, and my mom. My mom died 11 years ago, her heart broken, mourning the son she thought was dead. She never knew. She died grieving for a boy who might have been alive, suffering somewhere. The possibility was so monstrous it made me want to turn back, to run, to pretend that phone call never happened. But I couldn't. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, the car lurching forward. Now, I wasn't just racing toward the hope of finding my brother. I was racing to find out the truth, no matter how terrifying, and to beg for forgiveness for 41 years of a mistake that might have cost him his life, or worse. The last few hours of the drive were a blur. The guilt and doubt battled with the hope inside me, leaving me exhausted and my nerves shot. Finally, around 10:30 in the morning, I started seeing the signs for downtown Seattle. The traffic got heavier, the buildings started to tower around me. The GPS voice, cold and robotic, guided me through the busy streets to the Pioneer Square neighborhood. And it was a shock. I'm from Spokane, a quiet city. Pioneer Square was something else entirely. Historic red brick buildings were crammed up against empty, graffitied storefronts. The sound of a siren was a constant echo in the distance. There were people sleeping in sleeping bags on the sidewalks, even in the damp chill coming off the Puget Sound. The air smelled of rain, bus exhaust, and something else, a smell of decay and despair. I clutched my purse tighter on the passenger seat, a knot forming in my stomach. My brother lived here? In this place? I found Pike Street and drove slowly, looking for the address he'd given me. And then I saw it. It was an old, worn-down brick building with barred windows on the ground floor. A simple, faded sign read, "Pike Street Community Shelter." There was no one at the door. My heart sank a little. What if he'd given up? What if he got scared and left? I parked the car half a block away, triple-checking that the doors were locked. I took a deep breath, the cold air burning my lungs, and walked toward the entrance. Every step felt like it weighed a ton. I pushed the heavy metal door open and went inside. The inside was warm and loud, a stark contrast to the cold silence of the street. It smelled of soup and disinfectant. There was a small reception desk behind thick, scratched plexiglass. A woman in her 40s, with a tired face but sharp eyes, sat there, typing on an old computer. "Excuse me," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. She looked up. "Can I help you?" I'm looking for a man. His name is Jimmy. He called me from here in the middle of the night." The woman, whose name tag read Brenda, looked me up and down for a second. She was probably used to all kinds of people and all kinds of stories. "Oh, Jimmy," she said, a flicker of recognition in her voice. "Yeah, he used the office phone. He's a quiet one, doesn't usually ask for anything." I was surprised. She pointed with her chin toward a set of double doors down the hall. "He should be in the day room. Most of them are, till lunch." "Thank you," I whispered, my legs feeling weak. I walked down the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stopped at the double doors, which each had a small glass window. I peered through one. The room was large, with a high ceiling. A TV was on in the corner, the sound off. A dozen or so men were scattered around, some on old couches, others at metal tables, playing cards or just staring into space. They all looked so defeated. And then I saw him. He was sitting with his back to me, in a plastic chair, looking out the window toward the street. He was wearing a dark, shabby coat that was too big for him. His hair, which I remembered as thick and dark brown, was now thin and completely gray. His shoulders were slumped as if he were carrying the weight of the world on them. I couldn't breathe. Was it him? Was it not? My brain was screaming at me to turn around, to leave, to not face what was coming. But my feet wouldn't obey. I pushed the door open. The creak made a few heads turn in my direction, but the man at the window didn't move. I took a few steps into the room. The smell of stale coffee was thick in the air. "Jimmy?" I called out, the word barely a breath. The hunched figure in the chair froze. Slowly, so slowly, he turned around. The sound of the plastic chair scraping on the linoleum floor was the only sound in the world. And my heart broke. His face. My God, his face. It was aged, not the 60 years he should have been, but like he was 70, 75. His skin was leathery from the sun and the cold, carved with deep wrinkles. There was a thin scar above his right eyebrow that I didn't recognize. His beard was patchy and white. He looked thin, frail. This man was not the 19-year-old boy from my memories. This man had lived a lifetime of suffering. But then, our eyes met, and time stopped. They were my father's eyes. They were my brother's eyes. Unmistakable. That specific shade of brown, almost hazel, with tiny flecks of gold near the pupil, like bits of glitter. They were the same eyes that had laughed at me across the breakfast table, the same eyes that had turned serious when I scolded him for some stupid antic. They were tired, filled with a pain I could barely imagine. But they were them. They were Jimmy's eyes. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he tried to smile, a shaky, broken movement. "Angela," he whispered, his voice hoarse, full of disbelief. "You came." I took a step forward, then another, tears streaming freely down my face. I still couldn't form any words. All I could do was stare into those eyes. I stopped in front of him, my body trembling. I had to be sure. The final certainty. "Jimmy," I said, my voice thick. Show me your arm." Without hesitating, he held out his left arm. The sleeve of his worn-out coat was loose, and he pulled it up with his right hand, which was visibly shaking. And there it was, displayed on the aged, time-spotted skin, the scar. It was exactly as I remembered. A jagged, silvery line, about 4 inches long, cutting across his forearm. I could almost see the tiny marks where the 11 stitches had gone in and out of the skin of a 6-year-old boy, crying more from fright than from pain. I reached out my hand, my fingers trembling, and touched the scar. His skin was rough, but warm. Real. He was real. It was the touch that broke through the last wall of disbelief. He was here, in front of me, alive. I dropped to my knees in front of him, not caring about the dirty floor of the shelter or the curious stares from the other men. I grabbed his hand in both of mine and started to cry, a deep, wailing cry from a place that had been locked away for 41 years. "It's you," I sobbed. "It's you, it's you, it's you." He leaned forward, his forehead almost touching mine, and I felt his tears fall onto my hands. "I didn't think you'd come," he whispered. "I thought it was just another crazy dream." I don't know how long we stayed like that. 2 strangers bound by an impossible past, crying in the middle of a room full of lost men. Eventually, one of the staff, Brenda from the front desk, came over and gently touched my shoulder. "Ma'am, there's a small office you can use, if you'd like, for some privacy." I nodded, grateful. With her help, I got to my feet. My knees cracked. I was still holding Jimmy's hand, afraid that if I let go, he would disappear. Brenda led us to a small office, with a metal desk, 2 chairs, and a window that looked out into an alley. She brought us 2 cups of water and closed the door. We sat down, facing each other across the desk. The silence was awkward. There were so many questions, so much to say, that no words felt right to start with. He finally broke the silence. "Thanks for coming," he said, looking down at his hands on the desk. "You don't have to thank me," I answered, my voice still hoarse. "Jimmy, what happened to you? What do you remember?" He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of decades. "Not much. It's like a movie with most of the reels burned out. I have nightmares, always the same ones. Snow, the sound of twisting metal, screaming. I always wake up in a cold sweat." He paused. "The earliest memory I have, for real, is waking up in a hospital. A nurse told me the police found me in a ditch near a warehouse. I'd been beaten and robbed of everything. That was in 2011. That's when I think I got to Seattle." 2011, I repeated, stunned. "But the crash was in 1984. What happened in the 27 years in between?" He shook his head, his eyes full of frustration. "I don't know. It's just flashes, pictures with no sound, mountains, tall trees. I think I did some kind of manual labor, cutting down trees maybe. I remember the smell of pine and my hands aching, but I don't know where or who with. Maybe I lived somewhere remote, off the grid." He looked out the window. "After the hospital, in 2011, I was on the streets. No name, no memory. The name Jimmy, I don't know where it came from. I just knew it was me. About 6 months ago, a volunteer here, a real kind young woman, brought in some old newspapers for an art project, and I saw the date on one of them, February 28th, 1984. The date gave me a chill. I don't know why. I started flipping through, and I saw the picture of the wrecked bus, and next to it, the pictures of the ones who died. And there I was, my high school graduation picture. James Carr, age 19. The name Jimmy just clicked. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. With the help of a librarian, I did more research. I found the obituary, and it said you were the surviving sister, Angela Carr. That's how I found you. That's how I called." I listened, every word a stab to my heart. He'd lived for 27 years in a black hole, and another 14 wandering the streets, not knowing who he was. The guilt came rushing back. "Mom," I started, and my voice broke. "Mom died, Jimmy. It was 11 years ago. She died believing you were dead. Her heart just never recovered. And then we both cried again. We cried for our mother. We cried for the lost years. We cried for the horror of it all. When the tears dried up, a cold clarity took over. I looked at this man and I saw my brother. I felt it in my soul that it was him. But what if I was wrong? What if my guilt and my desperate wish were tricking me? I couldn't risk it, not after everything. "Jimmy," I said, my voice sounding more practical than I felt, "I believe you. But we need to be sure, absolutely sure, for both of us, and for Mom's memory." He frowned. "Sure? What do you mean?" "A DNA test," I said. "It's the only way to know without a shadow of a doubt. I looked it up on the way here. There are private labs that do rush testing." He seemed to deflate a little in his chair. You still doubt me?" "No," I said, too quickly, reaching across the table and taking his hand. "That's not it. It's that I need it to be real. I need it to be a rock, a certainty that no one can ever take away from me. Do you understand? After 41 years, I can't live with a maybe." He looked at our joined hands, then up at my face, and he understood. "Okay," he said, his voice low. "Okay, Angela, let's do the test." I got on my phone, and in less than 10 minutes, I'd found a private lab in Capitol Hill that offered rush kinship DNA tests with a 72-hour turnaround. The woman on the phone, her voice professional and emotionless, gave me an appointment for that same afternoon, at 2 o'clock. When I hung up, I looked at Jimmy. He looked exhausted, like the morning's emotional flood had drained every ounce of energy from him. The thought of taking him back to the common room of the shelter, to that atmosphere of hopelessness, was unbearable. I wouldn't leave him there. Not again. "Okay," I said, getting up. "We have a few hours until our appointment. Let's get out of here." He looked at me, confused. Get out? To where? I don't know yet, but you're not staying here. Come on. He hesitated, looking around the small office that, however miserable, was familiar territory to him. Leaving with me was stepping into a world he hadn't known for 41 years. It was terrifying, but he saw the determination in my eyes, and slowly he got to his feet. We left the shelter, and the weak Seattle sun hit us. It was noon. On the sidewalk he stopped, blinking in the light. I saw the fear in his eyes. The world had changed so much. Electric cars glided by silently, people walked around staring at glowing rectangles in their hands. To him, it was like landing on another planet. You okay? I asked, putting a hand on his arm. He nodded, but said nothing. Instead of heading to the lab, I drove to a hotel downtown. A decent, clean one. At the front desk, I asked for a room with 2 queen beds. The clerk looked from me to Jimmy, in his homeless attire, and back to me. I saw the judgment in his eyes, but I didn't care. I paid in advance with Robert's credit card. When I opened the door to the room on the 12th floor, Jimmy stopped in the doorway. He looked at the clean carpet, the neat beds with fluffy white duvets, the large window with a view of the city. He looked like a kid in a candy store, unsure if he was allowed to touch anything. You can come in, I said, smiling. It's ours, for a few days at least. He walked in slowly, running his hand along the back of an armchair. He went to the window and just stood there, looking out at the city below. There's a bathroom in there, I said, pointing. A hot shower, and I'm going to run out for an hour to get you some things. Clothes, a razor, whatever you need. He turned to me, his eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. You don't have to do this, Angela. Yes, I do, I answered. Make yourself at home. Get some rest. I'll be right back. I left him there and went to a nearby Target. Walking through the aisles, I felt completely lost. What size did he wear? What kind of clothes would he like? I knew nothing about this 60-year-old man. I ended up buying the basics: jeans, a few t-shirts, sweaters, socks, underwear, a simple pair of sneakers, and a shaving kit. When I got back to the hotel an hour later, the bathroom door was closed, and I could hear the shower running. I left the bags on the bed and waited. 20 minutes later, the water stopped. The door opened and steam billowed out, followed by him. And I held my breath. He had shaved. His face, once covered in a scraggly gray beard, was now clean. The high cheekbones, the square jaw, they were our family's features. Older, more weathered, but unmistakably his. His wet hair, combed back, looked darker. He was wearing just the new pair of jeans I'd bought, and for the first time I saw how thin he was. His ribs were showing under his skin, but what shocked me more was his body. It was a roadmap of a hard life. There were more scars than just the one on his arm, a large one on his shoulder, smaller ones on his back. He looked at himself in the large mirror on the wall, touching his own face as if he didn't recognize it. I haven't seen my chin in I don't know how many years, he said, his voice low. He looked younger, and even more like my brother. We went to the lab. The process was quick and clinical. A nice woman named Olivia Chen took a swab from my cheek, then did the same for him. She told us the results would be ready in 72 hours, on Friday afternoon, and that they would call us. We spent the next 2.5 days in a sort of limbo. We stayed at the hotel. I ordered room service. We talked. Or rather, I talked. I told him about my life, about Robert, about my kids, Michael and Sarah, who were now grown and married. I told him about my 6-year-old granddaughter, Chloe. I showed him pictures on my phone. He would look at the images with a distant curiosity, as if he were watching someone else's life, which, in a way, he was. He would ask me questions, simple questions, but they broke my heart. What was I like, Angie? Before everything. Was I a good person? You were the best person, I said, my eyes stinging. You were kind and gentle and brave. You'd stand up for anyone getting picked on at school. You were funny, and you loved Mom's apple pie. Little things, sparks from a lost past. Every memory I shared felt like trying to light a candle for him in the wind. The 72 hours dragged on like weeks. Every time my phone rang, my heart leaped into my throat. On Friday afternoon, I was sitting in the armchair, watching the rain start to fall outside the window. Jimmy was lying on one of the beds, asleep. It was the first time I'd seen him sleep peacefully, without the jolts from his nightmares. And then the phone rang. The caller ID said, Seattle Genomic Lab. My heart stopped. The hand that reached for the phone was ice cold. Jimmy stirred on the bed, woken by the sound. He sat up, his eyes locked on me. I answered, my mouth dry. Hello? Good afternoon. Am I speaking with Mrs. Angela Carr? The professional voice of Olivia Chen asked from the other end. Yes, this is she, I answered, my voice a thread. I'm calling with the results of your kinship DNA test. Are you somewhere you can talk? I looked at Jimmy, who was staring at me with a mixture of fear and hope. Yes, I said. You can tell me. There was a short pause on the other end of the line, the subtle sound of papers being shuffled or maybe a click on a computer keyboard. To me, it felt like a silent abyss. I held my breath, my chest so tight it ached. In the quiet hotel room, the only sounds were the rain gently tapping against the window and the frantic beat of my own heart. Jimmy was perched on the edge of the bed, motionless, his face a mask of tension. Our eyes were locked. Mrs. Carr, Olivia Chen's voice finally came back, calm and methodical. The results of your DNA comparison test are conclusive. The word conclusive hung in the air. My mind raced in every direction. Conclusive that it was him? Or conclusive that it wasn't? That this was all some terrible, cruel mistake? The probability of kinship between you, the first party and the second party, Mr. Jimmy, is 99.931%. I didn't process it right away. The numbers just danced in my head without making sense. 99.931, Olivia continued, as if she could sense my confusion through the phone. In other words, Mrs. Carr, you are biological siblings. There is no margin for error. Biological siblings. The phrase echoed in my head, and it was like a dam broke inside me. The air I had been holding rushed out in an audible sob. The tears I thought I had run out of came back with overwhelming force, but this time, they weren't tears of doubt or guilt. They were tears of pure, undeniable certainty, of relief, of joy. I looked over at Jimmy. He saw the answer on my face before I could even speak. His shoulders, which had been tense for 3 days, finally slumped. The look of fear on his face melted away, replaced by a vulnerability that broke my heart. It's him, I whispered into the phone, more to myself than to the technician. It's really him. Yes, ma'am, Olivia said, her professional voice now tinged with kindness. I'll be sending the full report to your email. I'm glad we could help. Thank you, I managed to say, before letting the phone drop into my lap. I stood up and walked over to him. He stood up too. We just stood in front of each other for a second, the space between us charged with 41 years of absence. And then I hugged him. I hugged him with all the strength I had, burying my face in his shoulder, feeling the thin, bony frame of his back. He wasn't the strong boy I remembered, but he was my brother, and he was here, in my arms. He hugged me back, awkwardly at first, as if he wasn't used to human touch, but then his arms tightened around me with surprising strength, and we both just cried. We cried openly, without shame, the sound of our sobs filling the impersonal hotel room. They were tears for the life that was stolen from him, for the decades of loneliness, for our mother who didn't live to see this moment. But most of all, they were tears for a reunion that defied logic and death and time. When we finally pulled away, I held his face in my hands. I knew it, I said, smiling through the tears. I knew it in my heart, but I'm a silly old woman. I needed to hear it. He tried to smile back. I needed it too. I needed to know I wasn't crazy, that I belonged somewhere. The joy of the moment was immense, but it was quickly followed by a shadow, the big, terrifying question. We sat down, exhausted, each on one of the beds. How? Jimmy asked, his voice low, echoing my thoughts. How is this possible, Angela? You saw a body. You buried me. I shook my head. I don't know, Jimmy. I don't know. The face was so destroyed. I identified you by the silver ring you wore. He looked down at his own hand. It was bare. The ring. I don't remember it. It was just a cheap ring from a fair, I said. But you never took it off. Maybe the other boy who died had one like it. Or maybe... My voice trailed off. We needed answers. This was bigger than us. It was a failure of the system, a 41-year-old mystery. And Jimmy, my brother, deserved to know what happened to him. There's someone, he said suddenly, as if an idea just occurred to him. A doctor, from a free clinic nearby. Her name is Dr. Williams. She's helped me a lot over the last few years. She's smart. She specializes in trauma. Maybe she can help us make sense of it. A spark of hope ignited in me. A doctor, an expert. Maybe she could put the pieces of this horrific puzzle together. Yes, I said, grabbing my phone again. Yes, let's talk to her. What's her name again? Dr. Sharon Williams, he repeated. I started looking her name up online, my mind already racing. The truth was out there. And for the first time in 41 years, I felt like we finally had a chance to find it. Not just the truth that he was alive, but the truth of where he'd been and why his life was stolen from us. Justice, however small, started now. I managed to get an appointment with Dr. Sharon Williams for the next morning on Saturday. The receptionist at the free clinic was incredibly helpful when I explained vaguely that it was a family emergency involving one of her patients, Jimmy. The clinic was in a modest building, but it was clean and bright inside. Dr. Williams met us in her office. She was a woman of about 49, with a kind face, intelligent eyes, and an air of calm competence that immediately put me at ease. She greeted Jimmy with a warm, familiar smile. "Jimmy, it's good to see you. And this must be your sister." She shook my hand. "Angela, is it? It's a pleasure. Jimmy told me about you. He was very anxious." We sat down, and for the next 20 minutes, I told her everything. The middle-of-the-night phone call, his fragmented memories, my own painful recollection of the identification at the morgue, the DNA confirmation. Dr. Williams listened intently, never interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. Her face remained neutral, but her eyes showed deep concentration. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, looking down at her notes. Jimmy and I waited, holding our breath. "This is an extraordinary story," she said finally, looking from me to him. I always sensed Jimmy's trauma ran deeper than the assault that brought him to the hospital in 2011. His amnesia was nearly total, a brick wall. What you've told me fills in so many of the gaps. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her desk. I can't give you certainties, of course. That would require a police investigation. But based on my experience with trauma and dissociative amnesia, I can form a theory. A theory that, unfortunately, makes a lot of sense. She looked at Jimmy with compassion. "Jimmy, I believe you survived the bus crash. The snowstorm, the chaos. It's likely the impact threw you clear of the wreckage. You would have suffered a severe traumatic brain injury, knocking you unconscious. The body your sister identified," she said, turning to me, "was, in all probability, that of another young passenger with a similar build. In the confusion, in your state of shock, a mistake like that is tragic, but understandable." I felt a wave of both relief and shame. "Now, for the darker part," the doctor continued, her voice growing more serious. "In that remote area, during that blizzard, someone might have found you. And this person, or people, instead of taking you to a hospital, saw an opportunity. An unconscious young man, no ID, who no one would be looking for. They took you." "Took him? Where?" I asked. "To work," Dr. Williams said bluntly. "There are illegal operations in remote parts of Washington state. Clandestine logging, drug farms, off-the-grid places that use forced labor. They would have exploited your condition. When you woke up, weeks or months later, your mind a blank slate from the head trauma. They could have told you anything, that you had no family, that you owed them money. And they kept you there, working, for years, maybe decades." The picture she painted was terrifying. My brother, a slave, the continuous trauma, the poor conditions, the isolation, all of it would have cemented your dissociative amnesia, she explained. It's a defense mechanism of the brain. It shuts down to survive something unbearable. The 27 years that are missing from your memory, you were surviving. Jimmy was pale, listening to the story of his own lost life like it was a horror movie. Then, around 2011, the doctor concluded, your health likely began to fail. You weren't useful to them anymore. So what did they do? They simply discarded you. They drove you to the nearest big city, Seattle, beat you to make it look like a standard robbery, and left you in a ditch. One less problem for them. The silence in the office was deafening. Her theory was horrific, but it fit every fragment we had. The flashes of manual labor, waking up in the hospital with nothing. It all made a terrible kind of sense. Dr. Williams then looked directly at me. Angela, it's crucial that you understand something. The man sitting next to you is your brother, but he is not the 19-year-old boy you lost. He is a survivor, forged by 41 years of a trauma most of us can't even begin to imagine. The road to recovery will be long, and he may never get all his memories back. You have to be prepared to love the man he is now, not the ghost of the boy he was. Her words were a gut punch, but they were the truth I needed to hear. I looked at Jimmy, at his weathered face, his frightened eyes, and I felt a protective love so fierce it startled me. He wasn't a project to be fixed. He was my brother, who had come back to me. Thank you, doctor, I said, my voice steady. Thank you for everything. That night, back at the hotel, the atmosphere was different. The truth, as ugly as it was, gave us ground to stand on. As we ate dinner, I turned to him. Jimmy, I began, my heart in my throat. I know this is a lot to ask, and I know it's going to be hard, but I'm not leaving you again. I want you to come live with me and Robert in Spokane. He stopped eating, his fork in midair. Panic flashed in his eyes. Live with you? Angela, I don't know how. I don't know how to be in a family. I don't know how to be normal. I'll be a burden. I got up, walked around the small table, and knelt in front of him, taking his hand. You will never, ever be a burden. You are my family. We'll learn together. Robert is a good man. He'll welcome you with open arms. We have a guest room. It's yours, if you want it. No pressure. One day at a time. He looked at me, searching for any sign of hesitation, of pity. But all he found was love. Slowly, he nodded. Okay, he whispered. Okay, Angie. I'll come home. And for the first time in a very long time, we both smiled. The next day, I called Robert and told him everything, the whole story. He was silent on the other end of the line for so long I thought the call had dropped. But then he said, his voice thick with emotion, My God, Angie, bring him home. Of course you should. Bring your brother home. And so we did. The drive back to Spokane was the opposite of my trip to Seattle. Instead of a tense, doubt-filled silence, the car was filled with a quiet, fragile presence beside me. Jimmy didn't say much. He spent most of the time looking out the window, but not like a tourist. He looked at the landscape as if he were trying to decipher it, as if the mountains and the vast plains of eastern Washington could give him some clue about the years he'd lost. Every so often, I'd glance over at him. The profile of his face, clean-shaven now, was so familiar it ached. It was our father's nose, our mother's chin, and I would feel this wave of protectiveness so intense, an almost animal instinct to care for this man who was both my little brother and a total stranger. I was afraid of saying the wrong thing, of scaring him, of reminding him of something he wasn't ready to remember. So, for the most part, we sat in silence, listening to the radio at a low volume. As we turned onto our street in Spokane, my heart started to beat faster. It was a quiet suburban neighborhood with manicured lawns and kids riding bikes on the sidewalk. To me, it was my home, the safest place in the world. To him, I had no idea what it represented. I pulled into the driveway and shut off the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. We're here, I said, my voice as gentle as I could make it. He didn't move for a second, just stared at the door leading into the house. It's a nice house, he said, his voice low. The door opened and Robert appeared. My husband, my rock for 37 years. He just stood there, a nervous but genuine smile on his face. He looked at me, then at the man in the passenger seat. We got out of the car. I walked around and stood next to Jimmy. Robert approached slowly, making no sudden moves. He held out his hand. Jimmy, he said, his voice firm and kind. "I'm Robert. It's so good to finally meet you." Jimmy looked at the outstretched hand like it was an alien object. After a hesitation, he shook Robert's hand. His grip was weak. "Thank you," he mumbled, unable to meet Robert's eyes. "Welcome home, Jimmy," Robert said, and in those simple words was all the acceptance in the world. The first few days were hard, awkward. It was like having a frightened, wild animal in the house, an animal you love desperately, but you don't know how to approach. Jimmy moved through the house silently, almost on tiptoe, as if he were afraid of breaking something. The sound of the dishwasher starting made him jump. The ringing of the phone made him tense up. He spent hours in the guest room, which was now his room, just sitting on the bed, staring at the wall. The first night, I left his bedroom door ajar, with the hallway light on. I had a feeling a closed door might be terrifying for him. I barely slept, listening for any sound. And the sound came, around 4 a.m. It was a scream, muffled but filled with pure terror. I jumped out of bed, my heart racing, and ran down the hall. Robert was right behind me. The scene in his room haunts me to this day. Jimmy was sitting up in bed, tangled in the sheets as if they were trying to strangle him. His eyes were wide open, staring in terror, but they weren't seeing me. He was looking at something only he could see. Sweat was pouring down his face. "No!" he yelled, his voice hoarse with sleep and fear. "The trees! It's cold! Don't leave me here!" He was reliving something, a fragment of that 27-year hell. Dr. Williams' theory echoed in my head. Robert started to step forward, but I put a hand on his arm. "Wait," I whispered. I approached the bed slowly, like you'd approach a wounded deer. "Jimmy," I called, my voice calm and low. "Jimmy, it's me. It's Angela. You're safe. You're home." He flinched, his head snapping toward me, but his eyes were still lost. "You're in Spokane," I continued, sitting on the edge of the bed, keeping a safe distance. "You're in your room. There are no trees. There's no snow. You're safe. I'm here." I repeated those words over and over. "You're safe. I'm here." Slowly, so slowly, the tension in his body began to ease. His ragged breathing started to even out. His eyes blinked, and the focus started to return. He looked at me, then at Robert standing in the doorway, and confusion replaced the terror. "Angie?" he said, his voice like a scared child's. "Yeah, it's me," I answered, reaching out my hand slowly. "It was just a bad dream. You're home now." He looked down at his own hands, which were shaking uncontrollably. Shame washed over his face. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I didn't mean to wake you." "Don't you be sorry," I said, finally touching his arm. "Not ever." That night, after he had finally calmed down and gone back to sleep, I sat in the dark kitchen holding an untouched cup of tea. Robert sat with me. Bringing him home had been the easy part. The joy of the reunion, the DNA confirmation. That was the miracle. But now, sitting in the darkness, listening to the sound of my brother's haunted breathing from down the hall, I understood. The miracle had a price, and the price was 41 years of wounds that I had no idea how to even begin to heal. I had my brother back, but the boy I had lost might never truly return. 4 months have passed. 4 months that have felt like both an eternity and the blink of an eye. Life in our house has found a new rhythm, a more cautious, quieter one. Jimmy's adjustment has been exactly as Dr. Williams predicted, slow and full of setbacks. The nightmares continued, though they became less frequent. We started a routine. I took him to a trauma specialist, a kind man named Dr. Evans, once a week. Jimmy went to his sessions religiously, but he rarely talked about them. I knew he was digging in some very dark places, and I respected his silence. Little, everyday things were like mountains for him. Crowded indoor spaces, like the grocery store, made him visibly anxious. He'd break out in a cold sweat, his eyes darting around as if looking for an escape route. Loud, sudden noises made him flinch. I learned to give a warning before turning on the blender. But, in the midst of all this, there were tiny flashes of light, small victories that gave me hope. One Sunday afternoon, I was making a roast. The smell of rosemary and garlic filled the house. Jimmy wandered into the kitchen, drawn by the aroma. He stood in the doorway, just watching. "Smells good," he said. "It's Mom's pot roast," I answered, smiling. "Remember? She always put a whole lemon inside." He frowned, concentrating, and then something shifted in his face. She always said the lemon made the meat tender," he said, his voice full of surprise. It was the first time, the first spontaneous memory he'd had of our childhood, a fragment that surfaced from the depths of his wounded mind. I stopped what I was doing, my heart racing. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice casual so I wouldn't scare it away. "She always said that." He smiled, a small, almost unnoticeable smile, but it was the first genuine one I'd seen on his face. It was like watching the sun rise. Slowly, he started to connect with the family he didn't know he had. My kids, Michael and Sarah, came for dinner. They were wonderful. They treated him with a mix of curiosity, respect, and affection, never asking probing questions. But it was my granddaughter who worked the real magic. Chloe, at 6 years old, didn't see a broken man. She didn't see the trauma or the lost years. She just saw a new, interesting great uncle. She would follow him around the house, chattering away nonstop. And he, who was so withdrawn around adults, seemed to relax around her. One day, I found the two of them sitting on the living room floor. Chloe had dumped out her box of Legos and was trying to build a castle. Jimmy was beside her, silent, just watching. "I can't get the tower to stay up," Chloe complained, frustrated. Jimmy slowly reached out a hand and picked up 2 long, thin pieces. "You need a stronger base," he said, his voice low. "Here, try with these." He helped her build the foundation, and the tower went up, tall and steady. Chloe clapped her hands, beaming. "You're good at this, Uncle Jimmy." He looked at her, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen since he was 19. A flicker of pride. He was teaching, he was being useful, he was connecting. Despite these moments, I was still wrestling with my own demon, guilt. Especially about our mother. I would dream about her sad face. I felt like I had failed her, let her die in unnecessary grief. One autumn evening, Jimmy and I were sitting on the back deck, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars come out. "Do you think about her?" I asked, not needing to say her name. "Every day," he answered. "In his sessions, Dr. Evans has me try to picture her face. Sometimes I almost can. It's like a picture underwater." I took a deep breath. "I'm so sorry, Jimmy. I'm sorry she's not here. And I'm so sorry that I gave up on you, that I didn't know." He was silent for a long time, and I thought he wasn't going to answer. The regret choked me. But then he turned to me in the dark. "Angie," he said, his voice firm. "Look at me." I met his gaze. The faint light from the kitchen illuminated half his face. "It wasn't your fault," he said. "You were 21. You were just a kid yourself. You did what you thought was right. You did the best you could in an impossible situation." He paused, and his next words were the most precious gift he could have ever given me. "If you hadn't done what you did, if you hadn't buried me, I might never have been found. They would have looked for you. They would have seen I was missing. They would have covered it up. Your grief, the world thinking I was dead. That's what kept me safe until I could be found. That's what made you answer that phone. You didn't give up on me. You saved me." Tears streamed down my face, but for the first time, they were tears of release. He had absolved me. My little brother, who had been through hell, was comforting me. In that moment, on the dark porch, I felt the weight of 41 years finally start to lift from my shoulders. I wasn't the big sister who needed to take care of him. We were just us, survivors, brother and sister. Today, almost a year after that phone call changed everything, our house is different. Fuller, quieter at times, but in a good way. A peaceful silence, not an empty one. Jimmy found a part-time job at a local garden center. He always loved the dirt, even as a boy. I see him there sometimes when I drive by. He's got his hands in the soil, tending to fragile seedlings with a gentleness that makes me want to cry. He told me once he likes watching things grow. I think, in a way, he's tending to himself through those plants. He still has bad days. Days when a loud noise sends him retreating into himself. Days when the nightmares come back with a vengeance. But now, they're the exception, not the rule. He's no longer the frightened ghost tiptoeing through the house. He has a favorite armchair in the living room where he reads the paper every morning. He argues with Robert about politics over dinner. He tells Chloe stories before bed, stories he makes up, about magical gardens and talking animals, since the stories from his own childhood are still a puzzle with most of the pieces missing. He is Uncle Jimmy. He belongs here. We never found out who took him. The police opened an inquiry, but after 41 years, the trail was non-existent. His past, those 27 years, remains a black hole, a terrifying void in the middle of his life. At first, that ate at me, the need for justice, for answers. But over time, watching my brother learn to smile again, I understood. What mattered wasn't looking back at what was stolen. It was looking forward to what we could build now. I still deal with my own grief, the grief for our mother, but the guilt is gone, replaced by an immense gratitude. Sometimes I pull out the old photo album and show it to Jimmy. He looks at our mom's smiling face, at himself as a gap-toothed boy, and I see a flicker of recognition in his eyes, faint, but there. We are, piece by piece, giving him back to himself. Last week, we were sitting on the back deck, watching the sunset. It was one of those perfect late summer evenings, the sky painted orange and pink. We were sitting in a comfortable silence, just listening to the crickets start their song. "Angie?" he said suddenly. "Yeah?" I answered. He looked up at the sky, his hazel eyes with the gold flecks reflecting the twilight. Do you think Mom knows? That I'm alive, that I came home?" The question caught me off guard, but the answer came from my heart with absolute certainty. I smiled. "I don't think so, Jimmy. I know so. Who do you think was looking out for you all this time? Who do you think made me answer that phone at 3 a.m? A small smile touched his lips, and he nodded, looking back at the sky, and we sat there, together, as the last of the daylight faded away. People talk about miracles. I think we expect them to be perfect, to erase all the pain. But what I've learned is that sometimes miracles are messy. They come with scars and lost years. My brother's return didn't erase the tragedy, but it gave me something I never ever expected to have again. A second chance to be his sister. He's still finding himself, piece by piece. He's a 60-year-old man with the soul of a young man that was frozen in time and forged in fire. He's different. I'm different. We're different, but we're brother and sister. He's here. He's home. And that, for me, is everything. Today, almost a year after that phone call, I live a life I never thought was possible, with my brother by my side. As for the people who did this to him, they were never found. His past remains a mystery. But in the end, they lost. They lost because they tried to erase a man from existence, and all they managed to do was delay the most important reunion of my life. I've learned that family isn't just about the blood we share, but about choosing to be present, to forgive the past, and to build a future together, no matter how broken everything seems. And I've learned that it is never, ever too late for a second chance. So what would you do in my place? Do you think I did the right thing, believing that phone call? Let me know in the comments what city you're listening from. And if you liked my story, please give this video a thumbs up so I can keep bringing you more stories like this. Thank you for all the love. On the screen now, you'll see other stories that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Go ahead and click to watch. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. Until the next story.